Well, good morning and welcome back to the Capital Group's YouTube channel. Last time we all got together, there were several inches of fresh snow and ice on the ground. We hope things have improved for just about everyone. I'm Kevin Fitzpatrick, CEO of the Government Technology Insurance Company, partner at the Capital Group, and your host for the next 90 minutes. We provide healthcare, commercial insurance, and 401k strategies to the Washington, D.C. business community. Today, we have a special guest with us, Chris Crummey, Global Executive Director at IBM Security. This is Christopher's 30th year at IBM, and over that time, Chris has helped thousands of companies, large and small, build a strong culture of cybersecurity. But as fast as cutting-edge defenses are built, the bad guys are looking hourly for chinks in the armor. Chris and his team help companies prepare for their worst day, the day we call the boom. That's the day when you have to tell your customers, the world, and the government you've been hacked. Let's hope that day never arrives, and that's what Chris is here to help us with. He's one of IBM's most requested keynote speakers. We're thrilled to have him here with us for the next 90 minutes. In addition to Chris, we'll be joined today by Rob Myers, the Director of IT at OPSPro. Rob has over 20 years experience in the information technology space, focuses on risk assessment and remediation for federal contractors to ensure compliance with DFARS, NIST, and everyone's favorite topic, CMMC. Kathy Goyne, CEO of OPSPro, is also going to join us for Q&A at the end of the program. Last but not least, our own Andrew Beardall is here with us this morning. Andrew is the in-house general counsel at the Capital Group and COO of the Government Technology Insurance Company. Andrew is going to lead us in a discussion on what you need to do from a cyber insurance perspective to protect your company from the back-end risks that you face post-breach. Needless to say, the stakes are extremely high in making sure that you get it right. You're covered for all the different types of exposures, including data breaches, social engineering crimes, cyber extortion. The list goes on, including reimbursement for expenses such as forensics, all the government reporting you have to do, and public relations. We're talking millions of dollars of exposure here. Throughout today's program, I'm going to be monitoring all of your questions via our YouTube chat feature. Please feel free to send them over. If we don't get to your question, please contact us post-program, and I promise you we'll do our very best to answer it. Our contact information will be posted. The program is being recorded, and we're going to send it out to everyone who is joining us here this morning. So today's program, again, is scheduled to run a little longer than our normal 1 hour. So without further delay, I'm going to bring in Chris to get us started. Chris Crummey, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so today's session is called Think Like a Hacker, because in order to protect yourself, you need to think the way they think. So for today, I've got 3 goals, and at the end, I'm going to see if I was able to hit any and all of these. So my goal today is how you work from home and in the corporate world. So 1, I want you to increase your overall cybersecurity awareness. I sometimes refer to this as your spidey sense. 2nd is to be a better cyber citizen at work. And 3, to share as many best practices that we have collected with 7,000 different customers I've worked with to show you what great looks like, regardless of you are a small, medium, or large customer. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about a common language. One of the major issues is that cybersecurity is looked upon as a technical issue. It is not. It is a business issue. One of the reasons why teams are not getting funded for cybersecurity projects is they speak technical. And business doesn't understand that capability. And there is a lack of conversation between the technical teams and the business teams. That language is risk. Cybersecurity is very, very much about the human being and not as much about technology as you think it is. So the common language between the technical teams and the business teams should be risk and risk focused. So for example, these are the common categories you should be having conversations about. Legal, litigation, and regulatory risk. Your brand and reputation. Think about some of the headlines you've seen in the news. You don't want to be certain companies right now. Financial risk, contractual risk. Are you meeting the contract that you have with the customer? Business risk, Operational, are you still running your business? So take some of these categories, have those levels of conversations between the different teams. A cyber security response is a full business response. Don't limit it to just the technical teams. That is a common mistake that we see. So one of the best ways to have a common discussion, a common language around skills, investments, and other aspects of cybersecurity is something we call left and right of boom. So left of boom is usually the technical areas where the things happen. The boom is when you are no longer in control of the situation. And then you have this concept of right of boom. This is your response. This is how you engage third parties. This is how you engage legal aspects. This is how you engage the press. Now, the really mature customers actually have a third area, which is the prepping for the boom, what I call left of boom. Starting with the risk assessments. What are your policies and procedures? Running tabletop exercise. I'm going to continue to talk about how important it is for you to walk through tabletops on aspects of what happens on your worst day. So for example, do you or do you not pay ransomware? At what point do you ever consider paying ransomware? What is it that you want your employees to do? God forbid that happens. Your run books / playbooks, where are they located? I've had customers go, it's in SharePoint. I go, guess what? I just encrypted your network. Now what do you do? So think through what these things are all about. What about your external skills on retainer? Outside counsel, forensics, incident response, aspects like that. PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency communication. There was a customer that basically lost their entire network and they were doing business on the WhatsApp because they had no backup in terms of their primary communication engine. Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. At IBM, our emergency communication channel is a satellite phone. Knowing who to call in law enforcement, cyber insurance, break the glass crisis response plan for your PR and communications. These are all things that you can practice and do ahead of time. So again, great way to think about left and right of boom. Where do you put the skills? Where do you put the investment? Where do you put the practice? So we'll talk about left and right of boom as we go on. So we're all suffering from this new normal, working from home. Now, this new normal comes with very challenging technical aspects. So think about a VPN, right? A lot of times that's a split tunnel VPN. What that means is VPN into the corporation, but also split that all the rest of the internet is directly accessible. Unknown, unsecure Wi-Fi. There needs to be a policy about unsecure and unknown Wi-Fi. Shadow IT is a huge issue. You have to remember, as a business response or a business person, you just want to get your job done. So if you're not making it easy for the employees to do that, they're going to use other technologies that you haven't approved and actually put the company at risk. Bring your own device to work. What about shredding sensitive documents at home? Well, we've seen very, very mature customers continue to remind their employees about cybersecurity by giving them a work from home welcome kit, covering the camera with a little capability, little post-it notes that says you're not putting your password here, right? A mouse pad that allows and reminds the employees what different data classifications they have internally for different types of documents and different types of procedures. And then things like red flags. So again, weave cybersecurity into the fabric of your employees and not a one-time-a-year training. So my favorite poet, Dr. Maya Angelou, says, people don't remember what you say, they don't remember what you do, but they always remember how you made them feel. So my challenge to you is, how do you make your employees feel about cybersecurity? We'll talk a little bit more about security culture in a second. But first, I want you to have some aha moments about what you're up against. So I've given you here 3 examples of attack surfaces that the bad guys have used. On the left-hand side is actually snail mail. They literally put a Best Buy gift card and a letter and a USB stick inside the email and sent it. Now, the attack here is the USB stick. I'm begging you to look at USB sticks in a very different manner, especially the ones that you might find on the ground. Because if I wanted to go after you, I would put the word payroll on a USB stick in your parking lot, and I guarantee you someone's going to put it in their machine. That is how the bad guys have gotten into air-gapped networks. So just look at USB sticks differently. In the middle is one of my favorite and most innovative attacks I've ever seen. Now, it might not be obvious, but you might see that human hair right over the white shoe. So on touch screens, when they see that and you go to wipe the screen clean, you are actually clicking the link. So it's a phenomenal attack. It's very interesting. On the right-hand side, as a car in Europe drives down the highway and the highway cameras are capturing all of the license plates, it's doing what's called an SQL injection, which is literally injecting commands into the application, and drop table means to delete the database. So that is a weak web application, and the bad guys are taking full advantage of it. Let's give you a couple more aha moments. Okay, on the left-hand side, you actually see woven Morse code into the email body because email spam filters are not picking up Morse code. So they're kind of one step ahead of you. In the middle is the aquarium in a casino that is internet facing. The bad guys accessed the internet facing module of that aquarium, and that is how they broke into the casino. Why? Because the password for that was still admin. And then on the right-hand side, I don't want you to forget the phone. I don't want you to forget your customer service reps. So the bad guys will play a looping sound of a crying baby while they're talking to your support reps, making them very, very uncomfortable and trying to get off of the phone to feed the baby, and that will break the procedures your support teams have been accustomed to making. They use emotion and psychology and social engineering via email, via text, via phone to break your procedures. Train for that. So it's amazing how they'll use crying babies to break that. Okay, those are some of the examples. What else are you up against? Full level automation. On the left-hand side, Kali Linux, with 3 clicks, I can clone your entire site. In the middle, the reason why I'm going to beg you to not reuse your same password is that the bad guys have tools that grab your password from the gym or from these other weaker sites, and they will automate how to log in all of your other accounts. And yes, they're aware of the fact that you capitalize that word and you put a 1 at the end. They're counting on that. And on the right-hand side is Shodan. This is literally Google for internet-facing devices. It's that easy for them. So again, you're up against innovation and you're up against automation. So what's my advice? If I look at the biggest attacks in the last 4 to 5 years, the majority of them have these 4 things in common. Either it was poor cyber hygiene, or it was somewhere in their ecosystem or their ability to not initiate what I call zero trust, a lack of zero trust, or some level of social engineering. So for example, Uber accidentally left a 50,000 user database on an Amazon S3 bucket, and the bad guys forced them to pay them money. They tried to cover it up, and now the former CSO could face up to 8 years behind bars. Poor hygiene, leaving a database open on the cloud. SolarWinds They're actually saying that the point was an intern left the password of SolarWinds 123 on one of the servers. Again, poor cyber hygiene. You look at Target. Target was a couple of years ago, but they went after, not Target, but they went after their HVAC vendor. They spearphished their heating and cooling vendor, and the issue was they had full access via their VPN from the HVAC vendor to Target. Why does your HVAC vendor need full VPN access to your network? This is an example of zero trust. Don't give everyone the full rights. You need to constantly verify the rights. So now the NSA is releasing guidelines on a zero trust security model. It's not a product. It's a design. It's how you think. It's design. It's constant verification. The Twitter event that happened with all of the celebrities, that was done by a Florida teenager calling into Twitter, pretending to be IT, and was able to get credentials. And then don't forget the physical side of things. There are some amazing stories how a box of donuts was the fundamental key on how they were inside, physically inside the company, and they put a box of donuts outside the door to say, I'm sorry, we are redoing this room, have a donut, and they were there for 3 weeks. So think along the psychology. If you could look at these 4 areas, you could understand how they do stuff. Let's just talk about ransomware for 1 second. If you lock down your RDP, your remote desktop protocol on Windows, and train for social engineering, you remove about 75% of the attack vectors used today for ransomware. If you just focus on those 2 things. All right. So what are the 5 things you can focus on to literally lower your cybersecurity risk? Number 1 is I refer to as the security culture. That is free, but really hard. It's how your employees feel on their first day, in the middle, and when they leave. It is a culture of cyber hygiene, understanding your risk policies. What is your risk policy for employees that give you a 2-week notice? What is your risk policy on USB sticks? What are your risk policies on other aspects? In the middle, I think, is probably the most important thing. And that is everyone at the company is responsible, not just IT and the cyber team. I've seen companies wear shirts that had shields on it, and they go, you are the shield, you are the shield. Everyone in the company should have a concept of shared fate. Focus on your number 1 brand recognition tool, and that is your employees. Passwords and multi-factor authentication is huge. And then zero trust. If you focus on those 5 areas, you will dramatically lower your overall cybersecurity risk. These are not easy, takes time, takes dedication, but it's important. So let me give you one other great piece of advice. Start at home. If you want your employees to increase their awareness, you start at home. You make them better dads, you make them better moms, spouses, everything. You make them better at home. I guarantee you it will come into work. Example here is a newsletter every month on new things to think about at home. Hey, executives, others, realize that the bad guys are going to leverage every piece of information you have on LinkedIn, and here's how to lower your risk. Understand these items in LinkedIn. Your phone team, I love, they created a comic book to drive awareness around fraud, and they created red flags around fraud. So these are great examples of driving awareness, starting at home, starting for social media, and then driving to their job. Now, how is IBM helping me? Right? At home, work, travel. There are 2 things that I want you to realize. We're very focused on zero trust. So regardless of where I come in, it will recognize that I'm trying to authenticate from a place I've never authenticated before, and it forces me to go through different steps. But most importantly, as we increase the cybersecurity technology at IBM, the number one design factor is to make it frictionless for me. Make it as easy as possible for me to do the right thing. You can't take away stuff or make it hard, because they will find a way around that. So for example, we're not allowed to use USB sticks, so they gave us Box to be able to share files both inside and outside of IBM. We have moved to a 15-character password, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Human beings are not designed to remember a 15-character password. It's too complicated. But they gave everyone at IBM, for both personal and work usage, a password manager. I don't even know what my passwords are. And they are 15 characters or larger, and it's astronomically easy for me to, I can do it faster through the password manager now than I did before, and I'm 10 times more secure. And I now applied it to my family, and I applied it to everything that I'm doing. All the emails that come in from external locations, because social engineering and phishing emails are so high, have the word external. And then for me to sign into the cloud, it's as easy as my Face ID or fingerprint ID. It's that quick and that easy. And in a lot of ways, I have passwordless authentication into the cloud. So it's super easy and 10 times more secure. So my recommendation is to not just focus on the what you're doing, but the why you're doing it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So security culture. We all probably realized that Equifax a couple years ago got hit super, super hard. And I have never seen a company go from being hit that hard to responding that strongly. They are trying to make a standard for cybersecurity. They are reinventing Equifax, starting with the CIO and the CISO. They called it shared fate. Every one of the company is responsible. So I love that phrase. 5 things. They created not a technical-based security framework, but a risk-based security framework. The cybersecurity team has direct access to the board. Where your cyber team reports into matters. They drive a security-first culture by actually aligning incentives. You don't get paid your bonus if the security part of your line of business doesn't succeed. So it's incentivized. They align it with risk and crisis management. Cyber situations is a crisis. It's a brand new type of crisis. And they simplified the vision down to 4 C's. Customer, culture, controls, and compliance. Think about that. Think about a mantra that allows you to have a simple vision for your cybersecurity strategy. Okay, let's jump into some real life examples. Kevin, I'm going to pause here for a quick second. Are there any questions coming in we want to address here that came from the first part?
Yeah, Chris, actually we do.
Okay.
This is a question in from Hugo. Do you have any recommendations for what type of password managers a company should use?
Right. There is a dedicated section to the password managers a little bit later, and I know Rob's going to talk a little bit about that. We can kind of hopefully answer that question during that time frame. If we didn't do it, let's address it at that moment.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right, let's jump into some real examples here. This is an interesting one. So the bad guys actually created a PayPal advertisement. They paid for it, and they put their own 800 number in the situation. And so when you call the fake 800 number, you're talking to the bad guys. And the bad guys have your email address. And they say to you, I'm going to send you a verification code so I can verify you are who you say you are. And what they're actually doing is clicking on the I forget my password, which initiates a 2-factor authentication to the victim. And over the phone, they literally gave them the information. Okay? So slow down. That is one of my major aspects here, right? Use the number on this. Do not use ads. So think about that. Go to the 800 number of companies. It's a fascinating way that they kind of snuck into the advertisement and use that to their advantage. All right, let's look at what happened with Twitter. It started with a phone attack. They got the stolen log information over the phone, pretending to be IT. 1,000 employees have access to this Twitter admin tool. They then changed the default email address and reset their own password. They had access to 130 accounts, and they tweeted from Joe Biden and Barack and Kanye West and Bill Gates, etc. So these are perfect examples if we go back to those 4 areas that we talked about, right? Phishing, training, over the phone. The poor hygiene of not having any policies in place for VIPs. If I were them, I would have policies. If any information happened to a VIP, you have to double check it. And number 3, you can't give 1,000 employees access to the admin tool. You need to have a zero trust model anytime these things happen. So these are some examples of what we want to go through. And secondly, you have to have a post-mortem. How did we fail? Every incident, every crisis you have to gather as a group and understand the post-mortem of what happened, what went well, and what did not go well. So you can weave it back into your procedures and your policies and your run books. Okay, this is email compromise. This is a huge, huge issue, multi-billion-dollar issue that's happening. We recognize Barbara from the Shark Tank, and she moved almost $400,000, and the bad guys were 1 letter off in the admin's email address. So they were able to use LinkedIn to find out who her admin was, be able to create a domain that was 1 letter off, and they snuck their way into the conversation and they moved the money. So you need to be able to have some pro tips about how to respond if this happens. First of all, who do you call at the bank? Right? Second of all, you want to support and drop in the IC3 and let them know what's happening and deal specifically with the law enforcement. They could, at certain times, if it's in a certain time period, get your money back. So what is your procedures? What is your run book if business email compromise happens?
Yeah, Chris, this is another area where we advise that you do have 2 factors of authentication for this kind of thing, for payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, benefits changes, things like that. And that second factor is not automated. So if we have somebody come in and they say, I want to change my benefits, that they have to call and speak to somebody in benefits to verify this change. Or if we're having an ACH for a client changed, we have to call and speak to them. They have to call us and we have to verify besides just an email or a quick web form or anything like that, because these things can get out of hand very quickly.
Yep, and I call that phone call, Rob, I call that human 2-factor authentication, right? So there's technical 2-factor authentication and there's human 2-factor authentication, and you need to use both. So good point. All right, another example here of an attack. This is actually PayPal's site. You can tell by the upper left-hand corner, you've got what's called an extended certificate. But something doesn't seem right with the login. And that's because it says, put in your credit card and your digital security code. That does not make sense here at the login. Now, what has happened here is the bad guys have dropped malware on this individual's machine, not at the server, on this individual's machine, and they're injecting those 2 fields into the local browser so it looks like it's all automated, okay? So again, slow down. If something doesn't feel right, no one's going to give you a hard time about picking up the phone and doing the right thing. This is part of your responsibility. This is 2-factor authentication. You are the shield. Everyone is responsible, okay? All right, we've seen this all the time with phishing emails. This one is extremely brutal. Why? Because again, they created a domain that was one letter off from the real domain. And they sent this email out saying, oh, by the way, due to COVID, your employment with us has ended. Please click on this salary attachment as we go along here. And so it's just brutal. Now, again, I go through what I call a mail triage. I slow down. I recognize that it's emotional. And then I ask myself, am I expecting this? And then I will pick up the phone. If there's an emotional situation, I will pick up the phone to try and figure it out. And then also, you got to make it easy for your employees to participate in this process. Please make sure you have phishing report buttons in your email to make it super easy. Now, the bad guys hit on different levels of emotion: fear, greed, curiosity. Hey, I'm here to help. Urgency. When you see an emotional situation, slow down. They're purposely using psychology and emotion to have you get tripped up in your existing procedures. All right. Now, how easy is it to create domains? I did it the other day. I worked with Pebble Beach the other day, and you'll notice that I could create for $1. I could create pebblebeachaccounting.com. I could create pebblebeachstay.com. I could create pebblebeachfood.com. Now imagine as a VIP or celebrity, you get an email from pebblebeachaccounting.com with a PDF with the most recent stay, because I watched you on Instagram and social media, so I know the exact days you were at Pebble Beach. I know who you are. I know who you were with, and I could craft an email with all that in there, and it looks legitimate. Now notice in the bottom left, I couldn't create travel.pebblebeach.com because pebblebeach.com, that domain is owned by Pebble Beach. That's the primary domain. So you'll see examples here of GitHub and LinkedIn and Instagram. Their domain squatting is a common way, because we don't slow down and we don't look at the domain in the email to understand exactly where it's coming from. So what can you do? You can over communicate what is the only and primary domain that you have. And then for $1, you can buy these. I would go up there to GoDaddy.com or one of these other ones, and I would buy for $1 every year the ones that could be around, right? So, you know, Kevin, when I looked at your infrastructure and your website, I saw that you have different areas of practice. And so I would want to buy areas of domain of expertise with your primary domain associated with that. It makes sense to do that. I'm going to stop to see, Kevin, if there's any questions.
Yeah, quick question here. We all know like Bitcoin runs on blockchain technology. Does blockchain technology have applications for these kind of trustless issues here we're talking about today?
Yeah, so it's fascinating that the bad guys have always taken legitimate technologies, tools, and programs. They use existing marketing tools. They use existing sales tools. They use existing everything, and they can use it for their negativity, right? Just like any tool that you have, a gun, a knife, a blockchain, a tool for good use can always be turned into a bad use, okay? Just to let you know, the dark web is the marketplace for these bad guys. They collaborate better than we do. They share their skills in the dark web. The dark web is run by Bitcoin, which is powered by blockchain. So in that marketplace, it's being used for bad in that situation. Blockchain is absolutely the direction that a lot of companies are heading in, to drive trust into the supply chain and into the process. So I 1000% believe in blockchain as a good technology and a good strategy going forward. I do think it will change the way the rest of the world does business. Okay? So Bitcoin is just an example of a blockchain application. All right. Domains, typo squatting, just keep your eye on that.
One other quick thing on the domains, Chris, is, an easy thing to do is make sure you have your auto renewal turned on. Make sure you don't let your credit card or your accounting group fall behind on getting those renewed. Because there are, like you said, the bad guys are out there watching for that stuff to drop off and expire and grab it from you, and steal your domain or make you fight to get it back and pay them extra for it.
Yeah, they almost blackmail you. That's a really, really good point. I've seen customers suffer from that, where they no longer own the domain. So again, I'm going to go back to Rob, the original concept of cyber hygiene, right? That should be part of that cyber hygiene. So here are 3 real examples on my phone. So on the left-hand side, I've got from Apple, from PayPal, and then a voicemail. Now you'll notice that all 3 of them are dealing with emotion, right? Some are urgency, etc. So on the left-hand side, I see that they have literally done a great job of recreating the look and feel of Apple. But when I click on that top where it says Apple ID, I actually see that is the domain and email address right where it says other, that long string. So I know it's not legitimate. That's part of my mail triage that I go through. Notice that in the middle, the PayPal doesn't end in an L, it ends in an I. If you can see in the middle one. And on the right-hand side, you probably maybe gotten this phone call about the Social Security admin and these other things. That was $19 million they made in 1 year off of that scam. So not only do they use voicemail, but they can also spoof a telephone number. So when you get the phone call, hang up and call them back on a number that you are confident with. So they can spoof real numbers, and that's how they do this. That's how the Twitter thing happened. They spoofed the support number to the employee. Okay? So sometimes the phone, some pro tips here, sometimes the phone can cover up the right URL, so make sure you do that. And again, slow down, go through your processes, and then call them back on your terms. All right. A fascinating attack here during COVID, because certain COVID vaccines require a cold chain equipment strategy. They wove themselves into the supply chain, and this is involved in 15 countries globally. They're spoofing a well-known biomedical company as a corporate executive. They went after the bottom part of the chain and moved their way up in different things. So again, slow and confidence, and they're gathering credentials, and they're doing different things in this situation. So their attacks can be global and tiered. All right. So how do they do it? Well, there are a couple ways to look at the steps the bad guys go through. Sometimes you'll hear it as a cyber kill chain. A lot of companies are leaning towards the MITRE attack framework. That's the adversary techniques and tactics and common knowledge. And so if you can stop a bad guy at any one of these bullet points, you've stopped their process. So think about that. Think about how to help remove any one of these steps, and you've killed the chain. So how do they do it? Well, number one is OSINT, open source intelligence. I cannot begin to tell you how much information is out there that I could use against you personally and corporate wise. I had it done as an IBMer, and I was blown away what they could find. And I'm in the business. So think about high school yearbook photographs. Think about your entire family member date of birth, your kid's swim practice. So they actually opened the meeting with me with, your daughter is at this location right now on this swim club, and this is the name and address of your daughter's swim coach. And I go, you have my undivided attention. So it doesn't take much for me to piece this information together to create a phishing email in which I guarantee you will click. If I've got your kid's coach's name and a PDF on the new schedule, and I put things in there that make sense, you're going to click on it. I use Twitter and other social media to best understand when you are online. So my phishing attacks are scheduled in a way that gives me higher rate of return. There's a joke in the cybersecurity world about your dogs. That is, if you get hacked, you're going to have to change the name of your dogs. Right? Too many people use the dog names, and I'm going to leverage that on your daughter's social to figure out, is that one of your security passwords? Is that one of your security questions at the bank? So again, every single piece of information we can use against you. Just realize that. OSINT, open source intelligence. Now, they also use the calendar against you, the timing of things. They will normally launch a cyber attack on a Friday of a long weekend because people are not having the full staff over, let's say, July 4th weekend. They leverage current events like a wildfire or COVID. The day that the WHO announced COVID was a global pandemic, the number of COVID-related domains that were created were 398% that one day. Tax season is coming up, and they're going to leverage that. They launch ransomware at midnight to noon. That is a common situation. They launch on Tuesdays and Fridays. Why a Friday? Because you just want to get out of the office and your mail triage strategy is short and you're not paying attention. So just realize they will leverage everything against you. The 30th of the month is when all of the documents and PDFs are coming in, last minute sales, etc. So they are going to leverage that. All right. So the calendar is something to think about. All right, let's talk a little bit about passwords, risk profiles, and multi-factor authentication. All right, so think about passwords and risk. You've got employees, you've got contractors and people that have given a notice. You've got people on special projects like merger and acquisition. You've got admin and or privileged accounts. And you also have IoT. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, there was the example of the aquarium in which the casino was attacked because they didn't change or monitor the IoT as an internet-facing device. And former employees. 60% of insider threat activity happens because the former employee still has access to the their username and password and their accounts. So there was a very famous Major League Baseball fraud case in which a scout handed in his laptop and went from one professional team to the other. And based on the username password he used on the first Major League Baseball team, they logged on as him to the new Major League Baseball team, and they were to look at all of the salaries and all of the information because he reused the same username password from one company to the other. You're putting everything at risk by doing that. So do you treat employees differently as a contractor or someone that gives a notice? Do you treat a merger and acquisition employee or someone with sensitive access, especially admin and privileged accounts? That is gold to the bad guys. They love admin and privileged accounts. Why? Because I can go into your ERP system and actually create my own identity. And I could then create a different way to move money and then get back on the phishing and send it that way. So your roles around passwords and risk profiles should be a big part of your cyber hygiene and your password and two-factor authentication. Notice on the lower left, the most common usernames and passwords is admin admin and 12345. Okay, that is trouble. That is not allowed anymore. All right, you probably at home have a password like this. This is called a primary password. And you move to another account and you think you're really cute and you capitalize the L and you put a 1 at the end. Yeah, we already know that. And you might do a little other fancy stuff. Yeah, we already know that. We automate attacking those passwords already. And we already know as a hacker that the number one number at the end is a 1. And we built the algorithms to do that. And we also know that what's called walking the keyboard. You click down the numbers and that is a known password. So we already know that you do keyboard walking on how you create passwords. So don't make it easy for them to do that. So that is the reason why these famous celebrities had their Twitter accounts hacked, because MySpace was breached. And MySpace, they reused the same username and password in MySpace as they did on Twitter. So I can't stress enough that you don't reuse the same password or don't modify those things. So let's talk about those 3. So I love my dogs is no longer allowed to be used. I call that your base password. Don't use that anymore. If you don't have access to a password manager, these are 2 other choices for you. One is called the password phrase. So maybe for my Netflix account, my password for Netflix is streaming Ozark's summer show. Now, for those, that's an extra tip. Watching Ozarks on Netflix, phenomenal show. Don't allow the kids to watch it. Okay, but that might be my Netflix password as what's called a password phrase. You can also use what's called a password sentence. So for me, get off the couch 2020 and get in the gym, no excuses. So the first letter of each word becomes the password. So it's a phrase I can remember. So if you don't have access to a password manager, these 2 models might be helpful and give you more security around passwords. All right, password managers. I happen to use 1Password. That is what IBM has given us to use. It is built into my browser. I actually put in my passwords. I put in my credit cards. I put in any and all sensitive information there, and I share it with my family. And you have, if you see in the lower left-hand corner, I have the ability to make it a memorable password, or I can make it a random password, capitals, full letters, symbols, numbers. It's up to you how you do it. So I don't even know what my passwords are. I don't even know. I don't care, because the system does it. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner that it is saying in that screenshot, oh, by the way, the password that you're using there has been in a breach already. You should change it. And so you have things like LastPass is excellent, and you've got other ones that are really, really good. And I know Rob's going to talk about some of that later, but this is the reason why I do it. And let's talk a little bit about passwords and length and complexity. So if you see on the left-hand side here, people saying password change sign-up sheet, you have to treat your password as something more secure than writing it on a piece of paper on a door. And then also, what happens is the smaller the password, the easier it is for the bad guys to break it. Just to get technical for a second, passwords are normally stored as hashes, which is a one-way encryption. And there are databases out there that have billions and billions of hashes, and they can just reverse engineer your password by dropping the hash into an application and reverse engineering it. So you can see it could take a matter of seconds to hours to break a password. That's why length and complexity are so important. So if I were to give you a visual about your passwords on the left-hand side, the Cheeto represents admin admin, and we've talked about that. And on the right side, length and complexity gives you a lot more security. So let's explain why. Why do we require 15-character passwords as a NIST standard? Why did the technical teams drive you to have length and complexity when it's not easy for humans? Well, the difference between 10 characters and 15 characters is astronomical. If I moved from 14 characters to 15 characters, I jumped from really, really long to about 300,000 years it would take to break it. So there's a reason why your teams are asking to do the passwords and make them long and complex. It is a huge value here that the teams cannot break through brute force these complex passwords. Now, Kevin, I'm going to stop here because this is a very sensitive subject, and I just kind of want to see where we are in terms of any questions that might have come up.
Yeah, no, great stuff, Chris. In order to really fool the bad guys, I actually just changed my dog's name to Password. So we're going to see how that works out.
Outstanding. Did you capitalize the P at least?
I capitalized the P.
Very good.
Yep. No, this is fascinating stuff, and it's incredibly scary. The peek behind the curtain, I think you've been able to give all of us so far. So really appreciate it. We have a couple of questions here, but I'll probably hold them till the end because some of them are probably more centric with some of the other guests, and you're on a roll. Please keep going. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. All right. So two-factor authentication. So there are different types. You have your SMS two-factor authentication. You have authentication apps like Google and Microsoft, and then you have hardware-based authentication or multi-factor authentication. Yubico is probably one of the standards out there. I know Google is a big user of Yubico hardware keys, but you need to turn on two-factor authentication for key applications, for your personal banking accounts and anything of importance, and for your personal email. So there's a famous story of a four-star general, former four-star general, who was on the board of directors of a very prominent company, who got tricked into changing his Google password because they phished him with an email that said someone from China is in your mail right now. Click here to change your username password. And they were able to get his username password and then literally pull all of the sensitive data out of his personal Gmail account and use it against him and the company. So not only is the banks and these other things that you want to use it for, but it's also the email, because the email is where you change your password. So if I forget password, that's where you do it. So, you know, again, think through those things. Again, it's faster through these authentication apps than it is in normal situations. And SMS is much better than nothing. And then as you end up going from left to right, it is more secure and more powerful as you do that. Now, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, like for example, on Twitter, it says, hey, how do you want to do two-factor authentication? And I could drop that list down and choose SMS, or I could choose Authenticator app, or I could choose different models to do that. So look for those things in the two-factor authentication, and I know it gives me more confidence that my accounts are safe in what we're doing, okay? So two factors, meaning factor one is your username password, and the second factor is the something that you have, like the phone, like these 6-digit codes. That's the second factor, okay? All right. Let's go to the right of boom. Okay. You are officially in a crisis. Someone finds out that, hey guys, I think I have a situation of interest. I think we've had some access to our crown jewels, sensitive data. I think we need to come together as a group. We are in a crisis, and realize that you need to have a common definition of what a crisis is, right? That is a huge concept that a lot of people don't realize. Where are you in a P1, a priority one crisis? Are you in a priority 4 crisis? Again, let's go back to those tabletops and helping you to understand what that means. Okay? Norsk Hydro, the largest aluminum producer in the world, gets ransomed. What is it you want your employees not to do? What is it you want your employees to do? This also happened on the first day of the new president. Not sure if that was related or not, but they responded better than almost anyone that I've seen. They got knocked down, but they came back really, really well. So something to think about, right? Tabletops, practice, think through these things in this situation. So there is the crisis response. So a crisis response is a full business response. Your business response should be made up of legal, comms, HR, IT, the business, not just technical teams. You should have your run books printed out, because if I ransom your SharePoint or ransom a place where your run books are located, then you're out of luck. So make sure that every time you practice your run books, you print out a version. And I've seen companies practice once a quarter with 2 surprises. Your outside skills on retainer, outside counsel on retainer, forensics on retainer. Who's in the law enforcement? Who do I call? Being able to understand what words that you use. Data breach, you use the word data breach publicly, you have started the shot clock for regulatory response. That's why I recommend you start with the word as cybersecurity incident. Right? Certain words start the shot clock for regulatory response. In the middle, how do you as leaders lead in a crisis? First, what is your North Star? What is your North Star? Okay, Maersk got hit with the NotPetya, got crushed. Their entire network was down. Their internal exchange was down. Their phones were down. So the CEO releases the North Star that says, do what's right for the customer. Do not wait for headquarters. We'll accept the cost. So now I know for the next 12 to 48 hours what my North Star is. The decisions I need to make when I'm not talking to my boss and people are freaking out, that my priority, my North Star is customers. Don't wait for headquarters. We'll accept the cost. Now, on the right-hand side, you have to factor in the humans. In a crisis, when you are having your worst day, the stress hormone cortisol has an 18-minute half-life in your brain, and that is where the major mistakes come in. That's where things get ugly with cortisol. If you've ever seen anyone panic in the water, that's cortisol. Human beings also have biases. The first piece of information that they get, they will run with. That is a confirmation bias. That is not what you want to do. We recommend something called dual verification model. Send one person to prove it and one person to disprove it. If you're about to do a tremendous amount of resource switching or other things, at least apply dual verification so that confirmation bias is not getting in the way of you about to make a big decision. Job bias is a huge issue. I happen to be this person in the company. I feel like I've got to jump in and force my rules or regulations or whatever it is they're doing because that's my job. Why are they doing that? Because you haven't trained them on a tabletop. You've not shown them where their role is in their worst day. And realize a crisis could be weeks and months long in recovery, and your employees are going to be exhausted. So you have to address the human side of your worst day. Now, let's talk about 3 things. Really mature customers have a pocket run book and a wallet or trifold run book for executives and other ones. What are these? What is the number to call? Who's on the team? What are our priorities? Simple structure around what to do when your worst day starts. Make it easy for them to participate, make it easy for them to do it, and so it can be stuck in your wallet. Again, you're driving the security culture with small things like this. One company required that pocket trifold was in your pocket, in your purse, one in your briefcase and one at home at all times. Okay? In the middle are run books or playbooks. What happens if there's malware? What happens if there's ransomware? What happens if there's a crisis? What happens if there's a flood? What happens if there is a hurricane? All of your crises should have a playbook and a run book as to what to do, what teams are being called when, and where are they on the priority list. The back of your badge is another great location to put information about what to do and what the priorities are, driving the culture there. The break the glass is letting you know where are you on the list. Am I a 0? Am I a 1? Am I a 3? Is 3 the highest? Is 3 the lowest? Where are we? So understanding break the glass crisis response plan lets everyone have the same language that we're in. So if the CEO goes, team, we are in a priority 1 crisis, and then the IT team knows what to do, the legal team knows what to do, because you've trained and you've practiced it. Just like you practice fire drills. Where to go. What exit to leave. Same concept. Okay. Now, there's something called a dark site that people have so that when they get knocked out, they still have a way to respond. So if you look at Norsk Hydro, the upper left-hand screenshot, because their sites were down, that was all they could put up. The middle area was when they had a relationship with Azure and they were able to redirect it to a temporary website. Okay, so you have to prepare for this. It's called a dark site, and it should already be behind the scenes ready to go so you can communicate, because you want to drive trust, you want to drive awareness, you want to drive that message of resiliency and that we're still in business. Now, the lower right-hand corner, I want you to notice on the bottom of the screen, they gave an update every day as to where they were. So here's where we are with the cyber attack. This is what's happening in this division. This is what's happening in that division. This is what's going on. And so they out loud drive trust through transparency. You could follow them on Twitter. You could follow what's happening. So I find the ones that respond the best to these crises are the ones that have transparency and trust. Okay. Your homework is to go to YouTube and to look for the Norsk Hydro ransomware YouTube video, because it will show you a lot. And you will realize one of the things that saved them was manual paper backup. So what is your manual paper backup strategy? How do you go back to that risk discussion we had at the beginning, but how do I keep running the business if I'm down, if I'm ransomed, if I have other things that happen in my worst day? What are my thoughts and procedures around being able to run the business? Okay? So think through this situation. And I want you to remember that disaster recovery does not equal cyber disaster recovery. Why? The bad guys have been inside of the network for 6 months before they even showed any inkling of what they're doing. They place in a back door for themselves. Then they pull all the data breach out and then ransom you, and then they're going to not only want the money for the ransomware, but they're also going to want the money for the data they pulled out. And then when you back up, you've actually put the back door back in. So just realize they understand that cycle. Okay? All right. Now, another tip here, up on the iTunes App Store is a customer KPN, which is a Dutch Telecom customer, and for free, they have a runbook app called KSP Runbook, KSP Policies, and it is an online application that is a runbook for cybersecurity and compliance and business continuities and other things, and it's up there for free, and you can download it, and it will give you a good idea of what a mature runbook looks like. And they do it because you're part of the ecosystem, and the more that we work out loud together and the more we share, the better. Okay? All right. And then one of the last things that I wanted to talk about here was when you are in a crisis, please make sure you don't make it worse for your customers. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that the WHO was like, listen, we'll never ask you for username passwords. We'll never ask for, and we'll never send you an email attachment you did not specifically ask for. And so think through how you will and will not engage your customers or your ecosystem downstream. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see, for me, this is again my screenshot of my personal phone. A couple things to point out. Bank of America is saying, hey, we don't share it and we'll never call you for it. So just be aware of that. And I also want you to know that you can see that I purposely created a contact in my iPhone with an icon so that I now know that when I get a text like this, I look for the icon to know it's legitimate. So I use that little trick to avoid phishing campaigns in my phone and my texting in that situation. Okay, so some golden rules here, and then I'm done. We can go to other sections and Q&A here. So number one, keep your computers, your phones, your operating systems up to date. Apple and Google and Microsoft go out of their way to put security patches inside of the updates. And the bad guys are studying those updates, knowing that you're not going to patch quick enough, right? And they're going to leverage that. They are researching. Microsoft every Tuesday comes out with called Patch Tuesday, and they're studying those to realize what their next attacks will be. So keep everything up to date. And there was a great story about how Apple, you might remember like a year ago, there were all these free emoticons that you got in this small release of the Apple operating system. That wasn't by design. They wanted you to upgrade because of a security patch. And the only way to get people to do it was free emoticons. Again, going after the human side. The threat actors are better organized, more motivated, more creative, and have more capabilities than you do. And I'm going to go back to another golden rule, and that is, if it is man-made, it can be man-broken. So there is no such thing as zero risk, okay? Threat actors will use every single piece of information against you. Do not do anything on public Wi-Fi that you don't want others to see. Use a VPN. Slow down, go through your mail triage, your email triage, your text message triage, slow down. There have been heads of FBI, there have been social engineering gurus, have all been phished. It happens to the best of us. But if you slow down and go through your steps, you lower the risk. Threat actors use psychology, urgency, uncertainty, doubt, greed, helpfulness. They did one campaign where they're like, you're over your mail quota, you're over your mail quota, like they sent 50 emails to one guy going, you're over your mail quota. And then the 51st one said, click here to get more mail space on the server. Of course he clicked on it, okay? Use two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication on your important accounts. Use human two-factor authentication, meaning pick up the phone, double check, and put the policies and procedures in place. If I have to move $1, I gotta verify it. You've got to put those procedures in place. Okay? Don't click on any links. Go directly to the website. Do not use passwords. Reuse the password manager or password phrases. These are some of my best practices here. So let me just go back. If you focus on social engineering, you focus on cyber hygiene, you focus on the weakness of your ecosystem, you are only as strong as your supply chain. Are you doing risk assessments through the contracts you have with your third parties? Do they allow good cyber hygiene and understanding of what's going on, and zero trust? Lower the bar, or actually increase the bar, I should say, to get in and to do things. Verify, constantly verify, but make it really easy. Focus on the human, make it frictionless for them to do the right thing. And you'll be more secure and you will lower the risk. All right, I'm going to stop there. I know that others wanted to ask questions, and I know Rob wanted to cover a couple topics.
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Wealth of information you just shared with us over the past 60 minutes. We got about 15 to 20 minutes left here. I'm going to bring Rob into the conversation here. Rob's going to talk a little bit about how all of this plays into the world of federal contracting and some of the risks that federal contractors are exposed to. So, Rob, jump in here, please.
Sure. The first thing I want to hit on was, I know Hugo brought this question up, and I'm sure others are looking at it, but the different password management programs. So I know Chris hit on 1Password. One that we use and recommend is called LastPass. And this tool's got many things that Chris hit on. One is the frictionless implementation. So when you use this program, it'll give you the ability when you go to new sites or have to change your passwords. The tool will automatically prompt you to let it handle that function for you. And you can control that it has, a 15-character password or even more. If the website will let you have a 30-character password, let LastPass take care of that for you and store it. And like Chris said, you don't have to remember it anymore. It's going to take care of that for you. Other good things that it gives you is you can share those accounts, passwords, credit card information across your team. You have the ability when you do that to actually hide the password. So for instance, I could share something with Kathy and she can go log into that website using our shared account, but she can't see my password. She sees, the hash marks like Chris was talking about, but she's allowed into the account, things like that. She can't change anything. And then I can revoke that share at any time as well. The next part I want to hit on, and Chris started covering some of this on, the MITRE attack profile, and, is how to block that initial access that the bad guys are trying to get in with. And some of those things that we can implement and, new common tools out there with Microsoft and other platforms is to build conditional access in, to look at locations that people are coming from with their login and decide what is trusted locations, what are not. Also putting in policies about impossible travel. So if I see Chris try and log in and he's coming from Boston, and then within 4 hours I see him log in from Missouri, the system's going to automatically identify and go, yeah, that cannot happen. And it's going to flag it. And depending on the policies we put in place, it could prompt Chris and say, well, to be safe, let's have you re-put your MFA login in.
If and Rob, that's an example. That's an example of the zero trust, right? That's that design, that bigger picture zero trust. That's how you execute those authentication steps in a zero trust model.
And then if the intelligence on the back end determines, hey, this is really risky, we see the login coming from, an outside the continental U.S. or things like that, it could just simply block access. And then, we have to go in as the back end IT department and do a verification. And again, do that human verification with Chris and say, Chris, are you actually in Mexico right now traveling? And, why are you not using your VPN client? Things like that. And then allow him back into the system if that's what we should do. There's also things we can put in place as far as, and Chris hit on this, but, building white lists and black lists for the software. So that you don't have to worry about your end user staff installing programs because they won't have the ability if it's not on the list of the 10 allowed applications that are on your machines. Another part about these controls, and it leads into the end user training, is giving your staff the ability or a stopgap to do that slow down to the reaction and second guess things. So give your end users, and Chris showed this in his example, the external tagging on emails. So they slow down and look and go, okay, this says external, but it says it came from Kevin. Let me double check this and look at it a little bit closer. Another really good one that we implement is you can do branding of a lot of your cloud application login screens. So when you log in with one of our email addresses, the screen will refresh almost instantaneously in the background, and it'll switch and it'll show our OPSPro logo. So I know that I'm actually logging into one of my controlled applications. Whereas if we got that fake email that says, oh, you need to add more size to your mailbox, go here and log in and approve it, that system's not going to have that same functionality, and we're going to know that doesn't seem quite right. I need to slow down. I need to ask, somebody from IT or get a second look on this. We can also put in things that are, automatically scan the links and attachments that come in your email to try and prevent that phishing activity from happening or the social engineering. Again, slow down the response, make people take a second look at it, and make sure it's something you should be opening. The next part we want to hit on again is, part of the threat protection part, but is the integration of that, and how new cloud applications can let you, scan and verify, across devices and applications. So not only can you control your corporate computer, but you can enforce policies that make people, if they're accessing your systems from an iPad, their personal computer, that they have to go through those same checks. Chris hit on this, that, those computers would also have to be updated. You got to have the most recent iOS on your iPad or the most recent Windows patch on your laptop, even if it's your personal machine, or you can't access the system. And lastly, we just wanted to go over information protection and data loss prevention. And these are all controls that allow you to do things to control your data and where it goes and what happens to it. So you can label data and then put policies around how it's handled for its lifetime. You can automate the encryption process of files and emails, and that can stick with that file no matter how many times it's emailed back and forth. If it's emailed external, that file would still be encrypted. You can even go as far as to have timeouts set on those files that after 30 days, 90 days, that anyone with access to that Word document will have to re-authenticate. And if you in that period have determined that subcontractor doesn't need access anymore, they can't see that Word document anymore. Even though they have it as an attachment in their email, you've blocked them out of it. And lastly, one of the big areas that Chris hit on was the ransomware stuff, and ways to handle that on your machines, adding levels of encryption to the machines and also doing backups. So that way, if something does happen like that, that machine can then be basically decommissioned, and you can get back up and running with your backup data and ensure that nobody is going to get into that machine that you didn't want to because of the encryption that you've put in place. Kevin, I'll go ahead and throw it back to you, and we can hopefully jump in and leave some time for Q&A still.
Yeah, no, Rob, thank you very much. And yeah, both Rob and Chris, thank you very much. Let's assume now everybody's followed Chris's advice, they followed Rob's advice, yet still you've gotten hacked, there's been a breach. What's the next step? Logically, the next step is you turn to your insurance company. We are an insurance company, and we see claims every single day, every single month, every single year. And I can say without fail, we have seen over the last 3 years a steady increase in cyber liability, cyber risk claims. It's not going away. I'm going to bring in Andrew Beardall here to talk for a couple of minutes about it, and then we'll wrap it up with a few questions. Andrew?
Terrific. Thank you, Kevin. So I'm sure after listening to all of that, everyone here has decided to go back to paper files, using the telephone and carrier pigeons, because this just scared the daylights out of me, and I'm just going to start turning off my phone. But what can you do when all this good advice isn't followed? When one of your employees hits a button and screws up your system? Well, as you know, in the right of the boom, that's going to cost you an awful lot of money. Now, you can pay that money. You can go out of business, or you can use cyber insurance as a safety net to help you in a situation like that. Now, here's the thing. A lot of folks think they have cyber insurance. They've called up and asked Hartford or Chubb or whatever, hey, add cyber to my policy. And in general, these companies will add something to your professional liability policy. Now that's a terrible idea. And here's why. These add-ons aren't particularly comprehensive. Some are better than others, but what you've got to look at when you're dealing with cyber insurance is, first off, what kind of data is it going to cover? Is it going to cover PHI, personal health information? Is it going to cover PII, personally identifiable information? PCI, payment card information? Or just other confidential or otherwise restricted information? The formula to Coca-Cola, the 11 herbs and spices in Kentucky Fried Chicken. Are those things covered by your policy? If you don't know the answer to that, call your agent and ask them right now, or as soon as we're done talking. And then also, what else is covered? Is cyber extortion covered? Malicious software? Viruses? What about regulatory costs that go with a breach? I mean, a good forensic examination, that's going to be between $30,000 and $70,000. If it's not covered by your insurance, you're going to pay for that. Notification costs, and even public relations. You know, who needs a good spin doctor to help them out after you've just given away a ton of client information? There are cyber insurance policies that include all of those. Take a look at yours. And if yours doesn't include it, or you don't know, call your agent and say, how come you didn't include these important things? Or explain this to me. And if they seem confused by your questions, find a new agent. If we're already your agent, don't worry, we've taken care of all of that. But find someone who can answer those questions, because cyber risk is one of the few areas of insurance where things are getting more expensive, right? Auto insurance in general is going down because cars are safer. People are waiting till later to drive, and people are driving less. Building insurance, you know, every new building has sprinklers. There's less likelihood of a fire. But cyber insurance, it just keeps going up and up, because all of these hackers come up with brilliant ideas like putting a hair across a pair of shoes in a picture that you're going to click on. And I can't strongly stress enough to make sure your insurance covers social engineering. Social engineering, you've heard about it a lot. Now, in the ancient days, it was a Nigerian prince wants to share his money with you. But today, you've seen some of the sophisticated things that can be done. We have cases, just one last week, where one of our clients got a completely legitimate invoice from a subcontractor. And then a few days later, that subcontractor sent them a note that said, hey, we've changed bank accounts. Can you ACH it to this account instead of the old account? Needless to say, that was a fake, and they were out tens of thousands of dollars because it looked like it came from the right person. They didn't look too closely at the email, so maybe there was an extra L in their name. Maybe they used a 1. Who knows? They're still investigating that. But you want to make sure that your policy requires requires social engineering coverage. And also, if you have any subcontractors, you want to make it a requirement that your subs have cyber insurance too. Because if the breach is on them and they don't have coverage, it will roll up to you. And your carrier may or may not cover that because you were dopey enough to let a subcontractor get away with not having cyber insurance. So, long story short, if you don't want it, that's fine. You're just going to have to pay for all of this. But if you want that bucket of money, if you want that safety net, when all of these other things fail, please reach out to your insurance agent. It doesn't even have to be us, though we'd like it to be. But reach out to your insurance agent and say, not just I want cyber insurance, but I want to understand what's in it. I want to know all these coverages. Does it have PR? Does it have social engineering? Does it have reporting costs? Does it have forensic examination? Does it have extortion? Does it have malicious software coverage? And what data is covered in your data breach? Those are just a few questions. If you'd like, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you 50 more to ask, but I want to leave time for everybody to ask questions. So, thank you.
Andrew, thank you. A question in from Hicks Video for you, Andrew. How are losses assessed from a monetary perspective when you have a cyber breach, given the fact that it could be across multiple areas? How does one even go about insuring against all those liabilities?
Well, when you reach out after a breach, there will be someone in the insurance world, not an adjuster per se, but someone who will help quarterback through that whole assessment. A good cyber policy will cover business interruption. It will cover data recovery. It'll cover things like notification costs to people. Part of answering that question really involves taking a deep dive into what your exposure is. We had one case where a client was doing work for NOAA, and they were monitoring buoys across the North Atlantic and taking that information and sticking it up on the internet for researchers to use. NOAA wanted them to have cyber insurance, but we had a lot of trouble finding what's the insurable interest there. Because, I mean, if hackers got to that information, what would they do? Put it up on the internet faster? And, you know, fish movement and wind movement isn't one of the big areas of interest to hackers. Not a lot of money in it. But we worked with NOAA and we worked out something that would be acceptable to them. So it really does involve a deep dive analysis into what you do and what kind of exposures you have.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And this is going to be a question for Chris here. What are the most bang for your buck actions that a company with a limited budget should focus on first?
The hardest part, which is the human part, right? So I feel like cybersecurity is more of a human issue than it is having the right tool or the right technology. If you start with security culture, training them at home, giving them or focusing on frictionless security, if you do that, I think that is the biggest bang for your dollar. I would start with the passwords and then move your way up to the overall culture of the company.
Terrific. Great. Thanks, Chris. Maybe we can bring Kathy into the action here for a second. We have a question in that deals with HR. Can you take actions against an employee or employees that are higher cyber risk or just plain old non-compliant?
So you can take action if you have a written policy, just like any other written policy. So if you have a written policy that states that you must use a password manager as part of your company culture, and you have a client that still writes down their passwords and leaves it on the desk or puts it in an unsecured Excel spreadsheet or anything else like that, and you find it, of course, you have to give a written warning and give them a chance to correct their behavior. But after that point, if they don't correct the behavior and they're not following the policy, it is totally a terminational event.
Thanks, Kathy. We got about time for one more question here, and I'm going to put this one also back to Kathy. This comes in from an individual. Should I talk to my company if something happens to me personally? If my personal email is compromised or hacked, what's my obligation to come back and talk to HR?
I would say absolutely. If in any way your personal and your work are commingled. So if you put your work email on your personal phone, check. If you check your personal email on your work computer, even if you just do it through a web browser, all of those things allow for co-contamination and co-mingling of the problem. And so you would absolutely want to advise your IT in your company to say, hey, I think I might have been hacked at home, and I have both my work email and my personal email on my phone, or I was checking my personal email through the work laptop or anything like that.
Terrific. Thanks, Kathy. Well, this brings us to 1 o'clock now. We're at the top of the hour. We really appreciate everybody's time and attention here today. We know this webinar was a little bit longer than our normal 1 hour, but even after 90 minutes, I feel as though we barely scratched the surface. But my sincere thanks to Chris, to Kathy, to Rob, to Andrew for taking us through all this today. We hope everybody has a wonderful remainder to the week, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you, everybody, for your attention today.